Joining us now, NBC News senior White House correspondent Mike Malloy, NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles, Politico White House reporter Eli Sokol, and Washington Post national editor and MSNBC political analyst Phil Rucker. So, Mike, what more do we know about this donor call, which is kind of about to get underway?
Yeah, Jose, this is interesting because as NBC News was reporting yesterday, we're not just seeing a defection in terms of lawmakers. That new list today includes 10 who have now said that they want the president to step aside. We've also seen a major slippage in terms of the amount of money the campaign has been raising since that awful debate performance by the president, as raising as much as 25% of what they were expecting to raise over the course of this time period. And so what this invitation that was sent to some key donors by donors supportive of the president and his reelection effort was that the vice president would be joining so that they could discuss what they called the urgent needs of the campaign at this point. They're going to be hearing not just from the vice president, but other leaders in the campaign and people out in the field doing the work to try to speak to what is the path forward. Now, of course, the president and his closest advisors are insisting he has not swayed one bit from his intention to see this race through. And you saw that memo I thought was so interesting, Jose, from the campaign this morning about another dynamic that maybe we haven't talked enough about, this idea that there is no alternative plan for the nomination. The president has made clear his support for Vice President Harris throughout this time period as well, and there have been a number of people who have insisted that if the president were to step aside, it needs to be the vice president who fills in. But that is not a given, and some of the mechanics for doing so are also messy and complicated, as campaign leadership has said in the past. And so this speaks to the fact that while the donors and a lot of the president's fellow Democrats might want to see a change here, it's not nearly as easy as it seems, and the president, of course, insists he's moving forward.
And so, Mike, we know that the president is planning to return to the campaign trail next week. Can you also give us an update on his health?
Yeah, we saw that statement from the president today talking about what the campaign wants to be talking about today, which was former President Donald Trump's very long acceptance speech at the nomination last night. The president saying in this statement today that he saw no agenda for the future laid out by the former president, and did include in that statement the idea that he would be out on the campaign trail next week. Now, we don't have any specifics. The campaign saying nothing has fully been locked down just yet. But for the president to get back out on the campaign trail, he needs to kick this COVID that he just contracted earlier this week. We got an update from the president's physician just in the last hour. He said that the president continues to show signs of improvement, that his vitals are all very good, very normal, and that the president still has some of those lingering symptoms, but that he's much improved today, Jose.
And so, Ryan, meanwhile, there are a growing number of Democrats calling for the president to step aside. What's the latest tally on that?
Yeah, Jose, it does feel like every time I check my email, another Democratic member of Congress is calling on President Biden to exit the race. The most recent being Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren of California. She, of course, a prominent member in the Democratic House of Representatives. She is a powerful member of that committee, someone who's also pretty closely aligned with the former Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi. And this is what she said in her statement. She said, simply put, your candidacy, and this was a letter that she sent to President Biden, is on a trajectory to lose the White House and potentially impact crucial House and Senate races down ballot. It's for these reasons that I urge you to step aside from our party's nomination. And that is very similar to the statements and the calls that we've seen from many of these Democrats in the House and Senate, a respect and admiration even for President Biden, but also grappling with the reality that the polls are heading in the wrong direction and that they view Donald Trump as an existential threat and that Joe Biden is not up to the task of taking him on in November. But within all these statements, Jose, there is a clear understanding that there is really no power that these Democratic House and Senate members have to push President Biden out of the race. He has to make the decision on his own. They are trying to make it as uncomfortable for him as possible to stay in this race by showing that lack of support from the party's most important players. Whether or not it has an impact on President Biden as he makes these considerations while recovering from COVID remains to be seen. Jose.
And Ryan, you know, one of the strongest bases of support for President Biden have always been like the Congressional Black Caucus and certainly the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. Today, as far as the Congressional Hispanic Caucus I was speaking to on my program here on MSNBC earlier today. Nanette Barragan, the chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, she says that they are all on board for President Biden. Today, however, Chuy Garcia, a representative of Illinois, joined, was it Raul Grijalba, I guess, the congressman from Arizona, as the only two members of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus that are asking for the president to set aside.
Yeah, and that's right. You know, those key constituencies, there's a number of these caucuses who have deep connections to President Biden and have relied on him and been an ally of his, the Hispanic caucus being one, the Congressional Black Caucus being another. He even has pretty good relationships with the Congressional Progressive Caucus. In fact, some of his strongest supporters, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders in the Senate, have been the ones encouraging him to stay in the race the most. But it's important to point out, Jose, that while the chairs of these committees, both the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, the chair of the Hispanic Caucus, have both come out strongly in favor of President Biden staying in the race, they are speaking for themselves. They have not put out statements on behalf of the entire caucus, which shows that there's still lingering doubt within the caucus infrastructure about President Biden moving forward. And while their leadership has demonstrated a support, that does not necessarily reflect the caucus as a whole.
True, even though on the Congressional Hispanic Caucus side, there was the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, their PAC did today, at least it was released today, that the Hispanic Caucus PAC was supporting the president. Eli, meanwhile, the president is isolating his Delaware Beach home as all of this is happening. At the Aspen Ideas Festival, one of Biden's closest confidants seemed to be leaving the door a little bit more open than before about the president deciding to leave the race. Listen to this.
I think our president is weighing what he should weigh, which is who is the best candidate to win in November and to carry forward the Democratic Party's values and priorities in this campaign. I am confident he is hearing what he needs to hear from colleagues, from the public.
How do you think this pressure campaign and then these different semantical differences affecting the president's campaign?
Well, Jose, that was an interesting statement from Senator Coons, probably the senator who's closest to President Biden. He almost seemed to be breaking character just a tad and acknowledging that the president is deliberating right now in Rehoboth Beach and taking stock of his situation, where he stands, listening to people, including people with concerns. That is not what the White House or his campaign are saying. They are saying emphatically that he is in it, that he is not wavering. But our reporting lines up with reporting from NBC and others that this is a very fluid situation, and that while the president and some of his closest and longest tenured aides are still pretty dug in, are still convinced that he has a path to victory, they are starting to hear the critique. They are starting to understand that, it's been 3 weeks here. They have not been able to stop this drip of Democratic defections. And, in addition to that, they just don't really know where this is going. I think that the Democrats, the people who have come out against him, they have not succeeded in getting Joe Biden out of the race at this point. So you have this standoff. I think people on all sides of this, Democrats who want to beat Donald Trump in November, they know that this cannot continue, that donors cannot sit on their money, that the biggest Democratic super PACs cannot continue to not be on TV, and that they cannot waste more time focusing on Joe Biden and his candidacy and viability rather than Donald Trump and his weaknesses. But this is where they are for a third and now into a fourth straight week of this since the debate. And so there are conversations, tough conversations taking place in that inner circle with the president, his family members, about, can we really stay in this? And if we get out, how do we do it? What is the path forward? Those conversations we know to be taking place. How serious they are, how far along. Still trying to get more information on that.
Phil, what do you think this is all about? Is this all about polls? And is this about, people looking at their districts and taking polls in their district? It just seems like, and let's remember the responsibility the polls had on getting it right in 2016 and the results of the polling there. Let's think of the polling that was showing us that in 2022 there was going to be a huge red wave that didn't even end up being a puddle. But is this all about members looking at polls? Is this what they're asking the president of the United States, who just went through a primary season where he got millions of votes from people who looked at him and said, this is who we want representing the Democratic Party?
Well, and during the primary season, you're right that Biden did win overwhelmingly, but it was not a very strongly contested primary. There was not a strong, credible challenger to Biden who stepped forward in those Democratic primaries. But you're right. These lawmakers, donors, they're all looking at polls. They're doing their own private polling in addition to analyzing the public polling that all of us can see. And they're homing in on Biden standing vis-a-vis Trump in these key battleground states. And they're drawing a conclusion here, not just that Trump would beat Biden for president, but that Biden could perform so poorly as of now that he could take down a number of senators, a number of House districts, and really have effectively a disastrous election day for the Democratic Party. And that's a cause for alarm. And in the backdrop to all of this, by the way, is the Republican National Convention. They've just sat through 4 days of television programming every night that was a display of unity and strength by Trump and the Republican Party. And that's an intimidating thing politically for the Democrats at this moment to grapple with when they have a president who has struggled so much on the debate stage and in some of these public appearances.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.